Jason and I were talking the big news in the NFL throughout the week. Brandon Staley out as the Los Angeles Chargers head coach after that debacle of a game against the Las Vegas Raiders on Thursday night, ending really a debacle of a regime for Brandon Staley. He is officially done. Now the question turns to who's next, Jason. You know, I want to get into the Belichick stuff here in a minute, but I want to actually start with somebody else. I want to ask you about Jim Harbaugh, because here's what I think I know about Jim Harbaugh right now, just as a dude and his future. I think he wants to go to the NFL. And I say that because we had multiple reports last week that basically a contract extension is on his desk, offering him $11 million a year as the head coach of Michigan football, 5-year, $55 million deal. But it is pending on the fact that he does not pursue NFL opportunities this year. Listen, I think it's his prerogative. I think if that's what he's interested in, by the way, I know everybody knows, I know you certainly know, Jason, but the last 2 off seasons he has pursued NFL jobs. He flew to Minnesota to interview with the Vikings 2 years ago on National Signing Day in early February. So I just bring it up because it's his prerogative if that's what he wants, but it certainly feels like if he was 100% committed to returning to Michigan, he would have signed that extension by now. I guess my thought with that is exactly what I just said. There is a contract that will pay him $11 million sitting on his desk. And again, we've talked about over the last 25, 30 minutes dating back to the last hour that historically the Chargers are not the type of team that is going to break the bank for a head coach. You mentioned your Denver Broncos, Sean Payton. They basically said, this is the guy. He's won a Super Bowl. He's the guy that we believe can fix Russ. He is the best guy available. We don't care what it takes. We're going to go ahead and sign him. And they did, to a very, very lucrative contract. And I could be wrong, but it just that's what trips me up is I think the Chargers is the best job because of the talent on that roster, but I don't know that they're going to pay $11 million a year. And if you're Jim Harbaugh, I mean, can you take the job for six and a half? That's the part that I guess trips me up on this, Jason, is are they going to pay the money that a Jim Harbaugh feels like he deserves?
So the Harbaugh extension point is certainly a good one, and as long as he hasn't signed it, the questions will still remain as to where he's going to be next year and what exactly he's doing. Belichick, I have seen, I know I looked at the candidate article that The Athletic put out through their Chargers kind of vertical, and the 13 candidates Belichick was mentioned, and it just comes down to whether or not they want to pay what he'll ask. If he wants 20 to 25 million, they won't take it. Again, I'm just kind of like, okay, you're going to pay Belichick 20 to 25 million? Okay. So I don't see that, but the Harbaugh thing, the one part about the Harbaugh deal is he's had a lot of success coaching in the state of California also.
True.
Won a lot at Stanford. Remember, he was at USD. That was like his first job, I think, or one of his first coaching jobs was at University of San Diego. He played with the Chargers for a couple of years late in his career, so he actually has a bit of familiarity with the organization. And, of course, what he did in San Francisco, he was 44-19. So this is a guy who has succeeded in that state and might really like living there. I don't know that for sure. I think that if you marry Justin Herbert in Jim Harbaugh's mind to also being able to go back to the West Coast where he has had a lot of success and some really fond memories, maybe you can make that kind of thing happen. Remember when you asked me a few minutes ago, I said Ben Johnson. The other name that I would say probably is going to be out there, and he's in this athletic list as well, which I found during break, is Frank Smith, who's the offensive coordinator with the Dolphins. But in 2021, he was the O-line coach and run game coordinator for the Chargers and took the job with Mike McDaniel and joined that staff. But apparently the players adore the guy. He knows Herbert.
Let me jump
in
real
with
quick.
Herbert. That's an interesting name to maybe throw out there also.
Let me jump in. Do you want a guy that the players adore? Because I don't know this guy, right? I guess what I'm just saying is, it's kind of like, let's use an example. I just used the Texas A&M example in the last hour. Mark Stoops nearly gets hired as Texas A&M. It's like, well, wait a second now. This was a guy that worked for Jimbo Fisher, whatever, blah, blah, blah. I guess what I'm trying to say is, Staley probably lost a little bit of a control of the locker room. And I'm not saying, frankly, because I don't think Staley had much of a backbone, and I'm not saying this Frank Smith guy is exactly like that, but do you want a guy that the players adore? One, do you want a guy that is going to be seen as a player's coach? Now, I know it's a new era, and listen, the Junction Boys, like we're never going back to that. But there's that element of it, and then two, do you kind of want to break kind of completely free from the Brandon Staley tree, if you will? I guess I just to kind of get somebody associated even loosely with Brandon Staley after the debacle that just happened. I know he's his own man. I know he's his own coach, whatever. I don't know how I would feel about that if I was a Chargers fan.
Well, I mean, I don't know. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. You have to do what you think is right in the moment. And if you're also factoring in the Chargers organization and the way that they have behaved in the past when it comes to coaching hires, you could see it as well. I said they adored him. Maybe I said it the wrong way. What it actually says in the article is he was there for 1 year, but he made a big-time impact, and you can pin that impact largely on his ability to connect and relate to players. And since he's become the OC with Miami, they're fifth in advanced metrics in terms of their offense over the past 2 years. And that's certainly the defense was terrible under Staley, but the offense has regressed pretty significantly, which is why I think the one guy, you talked about something you can't do in terms of a Chargers fan. The one guy I don't think you can hire is Moore. I think Kellen Moore's out. First of all, I think he'd be the interim coach if they were actually serious. They'd want to get a look at him the way that at least they're giving Antonio Pierce a shot with the Raiders, and he's making the most of that. But Moore, I think, and that's why I asked DeSager, I was curious what his take on Kellen Moore was, because Kellen Moore was the belle of the ball, and what has happened since he got there is Dallas's offense looks better.
Yep.
And the Chargers, with him there, they have regressed significantly, and it was such a disastrous year. I actually think this year has done a good bit of harm to his head coaching prospects over the next couple of years.
No, I agree, and the one thing I will say, listen, it's funny. I thought they should have fired Brandon Staley after last year, whatever. Why I bring it up, you talk about all the missteps along the way, and I know the offense has regressed, and even before the Herbert injury, whatever. But I do think that's a kind of a culture thing. I do think that when the players are checked out because they don't trust the head coach, I think it's going to impact what is going on in the offensive meeting rooms as well and the overall psyche of the organization. And so I just bring it up to very simply say, this is another blunder by the Los Angeles Chargers. I mean, you go back to the early part of it. You go back to week one. What was it? Week one when I can't even remember. They played the Dolphins, and it was like 37-31 or something, and the offense was humming. And I'm not saying you fire Brandon Staley after week one, but I'm just saying there was a moment in time where the offense was operating at a really high level. The defense was letting them down, and it's like, listen, you never wish a man ill will in his job, and you never call. But the guy was so clearly incompetent, as we discussed. He was, continuing to call his own plays and refusing to, make any change on the defensive side of the ball. It's just one blunder after another in terms of how this was handled, dating back to last year, early in the year. Maybe he had an opportunity to see if Kellen Moore could potentially be that guy, et cetera, et cetera. Really quick with Belichick, putting the money aside. Let's just say money's not an issue, right? I mean, the guy, as we've said, probably makes he probably almost certainly is the highest paid coach in the NFL right now. The Athletic kind of puts the number of 20 to 25 million a year. This isn't college. We don't know exactly how much these guys make. But my question is, if money isn't an issue, if Bill Belichick says, I'll come on the cheap because I just want to prove all the haters in New England wrong, I want to prove Bob Kraft wrong, I want to prove Jonathan Kraft wrong, and you are the Chargers, is that something that interests you?
Belichick.
Bill Belichick, yes, not Steve.
Yeah. No.
Not
me. Okay. I mean, and it's crazy, but I do think that just the way that most of us feel about Belichick has changed in the past few years.
Sure.
Because he has not won virtually anything without Tom Brady. Now, you give him Justin Herbert, is he going to win? Maybe so. I mean, we understand what he can do. We understand his football IQ and all those things. I just don't know at this stage. I can easily see it. I mean, I understand it. It's hard for me to even have any kind of a feeling that Belichick is in some ways too stubborn at this stage for where the game has gone. Maybe he's not. Maybe it's just the circumstances there, but all the decisions that he's been making from a personnel standpoint just have been disastrous. What they've done in the draft and not done in the draft, and the power that he's held throughout all that, you can't lay the blame anywhere else but Belichick for the team that's currently there. You can't look at it and say, well, Mac Jones has nothing around him, and give Mac Jones a little bit of a pass when it comes to Belichick, because on the Belichick side, it's like, no, Belichick, you put all those guys around him, and you put that guy in that spot in the first place. Like, you're the one making these decisions. So that would worry me, is what is your evaluation of talent at this standpoint? And the Chargers better have the right GM to pair with a Belichick, and I don't know that Belichick wants to roll that way. And if that's the case, plus the money that he might want to make, because this is near the end of his career, and what is he, 25, 27 games away from Don Shula's record? So he would maybe want to be there for that or be somewhere for that, but somebody will hire him if he's still interested in being a coach after New England. But I just don't know that the answer to the Chargers' problem is Bill Belichick specifically in what will be 2024. I am skeptical that would be the right move.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the right move. I do think the one thing that I would say is it's got to be somebody that, like, the details have to be in order. Because, again, Brandon Staley, defensive play caller, guys are constantly out of position. It's just a mess. Everything was a mess. And it's like the one thing you do need is a details guy, is a guy that kind of has an organization, has this, has that. I guess the big question for me would be, what are you going to do with Justin Herbert, right? Is this going to be the 2008, Randy Moss offense where you kind of turn things over and trust the quarterback? Or, I mean, how long is it going to take you to earn trust in Justin Herbert? So yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It's a tough one. I do think that the number of jobs. And I remember there was one weekend you were out, Jason, you were on vacation, and Arnie and I were working together, and we talked about this, is like the number of jobs for Belichick, I think, is much smaller than I think you would think for an all-time great. As an example, like Chicago Bears, if they were to draft a quarterback. Now, I know Justin Fields has been playing better, maybe they don't, but it's like if you are a team with a young quarterback, a rookie quarterback, like that's not the dude for that job. The Chargers, the pieces are kind of there. I just feel like they need an adult in the room. But again, if I don't know. Is it weird for me to say I don't really have a strong opinion on this? Like, I don't think it would be the worst thing, because I think he does bring a lot of what they need. But I also kind of need a blueprint of, hey, you got, to quote the old saying, are you gonna let Justin Herbert cook, or what are we doing here on offense? I guess that would be my big question as far as that's concerned.
Yeah, I mean, no, it's not weird at all, and that's kind of what I was saying. It's just like, I'm not sure that's the answer in 2023. I'm not sure that that's a marriage that works. I could see it working. I could also see it not working at all. There's a lot of that there. It's just the Spanos organization and that family and Belichick, that would worry me. But that's going to worry me with a lot of guys. That's why I think you're going to end up with a Ben Johnson if he wants the job, because everybody's coming after him at the end of the year, and already tried last year as well. That's exactly who they won in Carolina, as a matter of fact. There's a lot there, and if they don't want to pay Harbaugh, I mean, Harbaugh's a good pick, probably. Like, if he goes there and you give him Justin Herbert and he's happy, he might wear out his welcome at some point, but Harbaugh's the kind of guy that would be a dominant enough figure that the Chargers would be instantly relevant, and they'd be instantly interesting, which is something from a positive standpoint outside of Justin Herbert you can't really say about that franchise in the last half decade. So, that's part of it also. But I look at a Ben Johnson and a Frank Smith, and I think probably I could easily see Smith being the guy. I really could. Harbaugh, it just depends, I guess, on money. I could definitely see a scenario where Harbaugh's not there in Michigan next year, for sure. And if you're going to go to the NFL, it's probably the Chargers. I'm trying to think about some of the other places that will have openings, but like the Raiders, you don't have a quarterback there, amidst other issues, but you don't have a quarterback there. And a lot of these places, you have questions at quarterback, but you ain't got one with the Chargers. We kind of think we know what Justin Herbert is. This next coach, though, if it doesn't work with the next coach,
you're right.
That's when we start talking about Justin Herbert being something that needs to be reevaluated as well. Right now, he's got a pass, and deservedly so. I don't think that he needs to take a ton of this. But the next coach, there's going to be a lot of pressure on Justin Herbert as well.
I don't disagree on that. I don't disagree on that he has gotten a pass on Brandon Staley and on Anthony Lynn. I don't think either of those guys was the answer. I do think, regardless, the point that you just brought up about Frank Smith, the Dolphins offensive coordinator who was with the Los Angeles Chargers, I think one thing's clear. You got to go offense.
Yes, for sure.
You got to go with the guy that knows offense. Or, again, if you somehow, if Belichick is interested, then I need a pretty good blueprint of how you plan on using it.
Let me throw one more name at you before we get to break.
Let's do it.
Mike Tomlin.
So John Middlecoff was the first one that I saw say this. I know I literally said within the last 30 seconds, it's got to be somebody offense.
Yeah.
I will say that I don't think it'd be the worst thing for Mike Tomlin.
Me either.
Yeah, and again, I think he is a lot of what that organization needs. Discipline, structure, accountability. And what'd you just say about Brandon Staley last segment? A guy that every time he goes to the podium, well, we didn't execute, we didn't this, we didn't that. Mike Tomlin, one thing you could say about him, he'll look the media in the eye and say, I'm not good enough. He said it tonight after the game against the Indianapolis Colts. And so I don't know what his contract structure is, but one, I think he would fit the Chargers well. And two, listen, we've talked about this. I think it's kind of run its course in Pittsburgh. We also
change the scenery, Tom.
Yeah. I mean, how long has he been? It's been like 15 years,
I think. He's been there forever.
Yeah, so.
At least. He's been there forever.
Well,
and I have so much respect for him. Like, Tomlin is a name. I know that Vrabel's name's been mentioned a few times as well, just because the Titans season has gone the way it has. I don't think he's going anywhere. I'm in Nashville. I don't think he's going anywhere. But he and Tomlin are similar in many respects to me. Those are two guys on the defensive side of the ball I look at. Matter of fact, they're the only two guys, I think, on the defensive side of the ball that I look at as a head coach. Because as I've said before, if you hire a hot offensive coordinator, you bring in an offensive coordinator, you're going to be finding another one 2 years from now because somebody's going to make them a head coach. So you better just go ahead and find the hot OC and make him the head coach to start with so that you don't have a rotating coordinatorship underneath a head coach.